Okay, well, we may as well get started. Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nola. I'm based at Tufts, and I work on the A&H Academy Research Communities Initiative with Will and Alex and Shaylin as well. And I'm so glad everyone's here today joining us for this roundtable. I know there are some familiar faces, and I'll do an intro momentarily. But before we get into that, I just wanted to pass over to Paul quickly so he can acknowledge one of his co-authors who is unfortunately not with us.
Yeah, hello, everyone. Thank you, Nola, for this opportunity to give this presentation. And thanks to every one of you for joining for today's roundtable discussion. And as Nola said, one of my colleagues, Eugenia, she was my group member and back in 2019 when we were writing a proposal for a bachelor thesis and also the defense. She was a core team member, and we came up with this idea to research about food waste management in restaurants, which was non-existent in the Ghanaian literature. We couldn't find anything. So this research came really out of inspiration, and Eugenia was very key in helping us come up with collecting data and the findings. Even our research proposal in front of more than 10 faculty members, Eugenia was bold. She stood in front of everyone and the agribusiness group involving first year, second years, final years. And she presented our research proposal. She was the only lady amongst a group of 4 people. In addition, our final defense, she was the same person who defended the 4 of us. And that was a great work and effort from her. She was also the General Secretary to the Agribusiness Students Association at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. But unfortunately, I got a bad news about 3 months ago that Eugenia has passed on. She's no more with us. And today, as we talk about this paper, I want us to acknowledge her contribution, and also recognize that even though she's not with us, her legacy lives on, and she made her family proud and the world proud. And we hope someday this work will come to a limelight and she would even get a bigger and due credit. Thank you. May her soul rest in perfect peace.
Thank you for sharing that, Paul. And definitely, I'm glad we have the opportunity to acknowledge her contributions and also talk a little bit about her life as well. So thank you for sharing that. Um, So I'll do a quick introduction to the research communities in general, and then I'll pass it over to Paul, who will present that body of work, and then we'll move on to an open discussion after about 30 minutes. Um, so in the meantime, if you're able, please go ahead and turn your camera on and introduce yourself in the chat. Um, and so, for those of you who are new to research communities, they allow community members to share their research and convene people who are interested in similar topics to share successes, failures, learnings, get feedback from other people who are familiar with the topic. And we have had 2 different research communities. We have this one on food supply loss and waste, and we also have another one on food access and demand for healthy diets. So between the 2 of them, they kind of cover all aspects of food systems. And our past presenters have shared their experiences all over the world, including in Ghana, like Paul, Nigeria, Pakistan, Uganda, and Vietnam. So if you'd like to present at an upcoming research community, please get in touch with us. I'll put our email in the chat. It's researchcommunities@tufts.edu. Um, and then I'll pass it over to Paul now to begin his presentation. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Nola. Thanks everyone once again for coming. At this moment, I would start sharing my slide, then we can go straight into a research paper that you've all been waiting for. Hope it's visible. Yeah, so this is a work that we started working on in 2019, I think. The latter part of 2018, then 2019, the proposal was accepted. Then we went around with data collection, and today I'm excited to share the findings with you. But before we delve into the paper, let us bring ourselves to speed. Some facts about global food loss and waste. So the World Food Program points out that, and several other studies, that the world produces enough food for every child, every woman, and every man on the planet. So the big question is that why then is there hunger in the world? And this is something that the answer is definitely not one thing. But today we would focus on one aspect of it, which is food waste. And according to the UN Environment Programme's Food Waste Index Report 2024, 1/3 of all food that is produced globally never gets eaten. 13% is lost before it arrives at the shelves, and then about 19% from retail to consumption is wasted. Just a little bit, I'm having some technical difficulty here. Okay, good. And 1 billion meals a day is lost or wasted globally. So if we see that 1 out of every 11 people go to bed hungry every day, but at the same time, 1 billion meals is lost or wasted globally on daily basis, then this is very astonishing. And about this, the food waste, when we put it into monetary value, this is about 1 trillion US dollars per annum and contributes to about 10% global greenhouse gas emissions. And where does the waste occur? Where does the food waste occur? About 60% of this happen at home, which is about 79 kilograms per capita per year. So as we look at these facts, we should also be thinking, am I on the average or at the minimum or contributing even more than this average per capita food waste? At the food service, we see that 36 kilograms of food is wasted and 17 kilograms per capita is wasted at the retail outlet. So this is the outline of today's presentation. I will talk about the background. I'll then give you the rationale for this study and then our objectives. I'll talk about the methods and then I'll present the results and conclusion. I have already given you some facts about food waste, which is not so different from what we had in our introduction section of our paper. So I wouldn't bore you so much with facts and statistics, but I would want to tell you more about the authors. We have the corresponding author, Sete Tuya, who was our supervisor for our master thesis. And then I mentioned Eugenia, who was one of my colleagues. And then we have other faculty members who found our research very interesting. So after we defended and had our thesis, they came together, or we came together, and even added some extra data to what we did initially and conducted a different, especially for the determinants of food waste, we did a different set of regression analysis to predict the determinants of food waste, which we would see later in the discussion. And if you want to access this paper, I would share the slides after this presentation, and you can get the paper through this link here. The current food waste estimation that we see around the world is mainly based on modeling and extrapolation. So if you are looking for real food waste quantities that people went around weighing food waste in homes, in restaurants, and even along the supply chain, sometimes getting such data is difficult. And a few studies that have been published focus on household food waste and also the behaviors of household members towards food waste. And when we come to low middle income countries, especially in the food service sector, as data or publications on food waste management is largely absent. Erickson and others in 2019 pointed out that reducing food waste in restaurants, cafeteria, and canteen could yield substantial benefits. So looking at these, our paper came up with 4 research objectives. The first was to empirically quantify food waste, to go around and quantify food waste, and then assess the financial cost of it. And the second objective was to determine which factors influence the volume of food waste that is being generated. Then we looked at the waste management practices adopted by restaurants and then what challenges they face. So as part of our material and methods, the study was focused in the Ashanti region of Ghana, at the regional capital, which is Kumasi. We collected primary data in May, June 2019, and the sampling technique was multi-stage. We use a purposive sampling technique to select the Ashanti region, which is like a nodal region connecting different other regions and also very busy economic center. Then we also selected Kumasi, which was the regional capital. And based on where we can find these restaurants operating, we selected 13 communities. Then to get to the individual restaurants, we used a systematic random sampling technique. Overall, 120 restaurants were selected for this study. Now let's see, how did we quantify edible food waste? In a normal day, the businesses in Ghana, the food businesses, they don't segregate food waste. Everything is put together, both the trash, the semi-liquid food waste, and also the solid food waste. Everything is put together and dumped. So what we did was to go around, talk to the managers and explain to them why this research and why we need their cooperation and support. So they agreed. We provided them with waste bags where they segregated food waste. And with our good friend here, we were able to weigh the food waste. We went around, we did it in a week. We went around every day. They will keep the waste until the end of the business day. Then we will go around in the evening and weigh the food waste that was being generated. And the average was taken for further analysis. To put this waste generated in monetary value, first we looked at the value of the waste. And the value of the waste was arrived by putting together 2 parameters, which is represented here as a P. So the parameter I is the value of leftovers. So the foods that the restaurants produce but were not able to sell, these go into the leftover. And the plate waste, what customers left behind after eating. So combining both parameters, we get the value of food waste. And the financial cost to the restaurant was also arrived by 2 parameters. The first, which is the value of leftovers, which is very obvious. You produce something you are not able to sell, it is a financial cost to you. And if you are not able to reuse it or put it into other use, that brings in money. But we didn't include the plate waste because customers have paid for it, but the restaurant will need to dispose it. So we added the cost of disposal, which is the DII. Then we deducted any revenue the restaurants made from reusing either the leftover or the plate waste or selling it to other people who are interested. So that is how we arrived at the financial cost of food waste. And for the determinants, we use the multiple linear regression model. And we have here the dependent variable, which is the quantity of food waste generated, and then a set of independent variables such as the restaurant, how many dishes they produce in a day, how many times they operate in a day, whether they have power backups or not, and the experience of the manager, whether they estimate demand or they forecast demand. So it looks a bit messed up here. I should have checked it again, but yeah, sorry for that. Then after our analysis, we realized that the distribution of the data was not normal. So to relax it to accommodate this and also for variables that takes like dummy variables, we use the generalized linear model. And to understand the food waste management practices used by the restaurants, we use this hierarchy of disposing non-hazardous food waste that has been proposed by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. So from the top of the triangle to the bottom is the most preferred to the least preferred. So source reduction and reuse is the most preferred, all the way to disposal, which is the least preferred. And we use a 5-point Likert scale to understand how restaurants manage food waste. So here, the boring part, the descriptive statistics, but I'll try to make it as exciting as possible. So what we found was that educational background for the managers, mostly the managers have completed high school with about 9 years of experience, and a greater proportion of them were females. And for the kitchen staff, we saw that most of them had about 9 years of education, which is equivalent to a junior high school, and about 63% of them had received in-service training. And at the bottom, we have the source of power, which indicates that about 60% of the restaurants have additional, have a power backup in addition to the national electricity grid. Then the food waste quantity and cost. So the table 2 shows the different food waste categories. We segregated them. We had rice and related foodstuffs. Then we had maize-based or corn-based food products. We had cassava or manioc based food products. Then boiled yam and others. And what we find here is the average quantity wasted in a day in kilograms. So for rice, on average, a restaurant is wasting about 3 kilograms of food in a day. And putting all the 120 restaurants together, we get about 250 kilograms of rice food waste. Then for cassava, which was the major contributor because it's much bulkier, we had about 4 kilograms on average and about 300 kilograms wasted in a day. And the financial cost, let's focus on the first column, the first, like the value of food waste right here within this column. So first we valued the food waste and then we looked at the financial cost of it. So as I explained in the methodology, we had the food left over. And what we found was that in a day, a restaurant is, the food leftover cost to a restaurant is about $35. And putting all the 120 restaurants together, we are getting about $4,000 of food wasted in a day. And for plate waste, we get about $12 wasted in a day. And in total, we are getting about $5,680 of food that is being wasted. And the financial cost to the restaurant, we exclude the plate waste, but we include the cost of disposal. So we see that the financial cost to the restaurant is a bit less than the value of waste that is being generated. But what we should take note is that in quantifying how much of food is being wasted in a day as a summary or conclusion, we use within this section the value of food that is being wasted. I mean, here. Oh, sorry. This is messing up a little bit. Yeah. I try to use the presenter mode and there's a little glitch here. I would fix it real quick and get back to the presentation. Oh, I'm sorry for this. Yeah. Okay. I think I'm back. So we used the value 5,680, which was the total food that is being wasted in a day in quantifying the annual food waste for all restaurants. This is the summary of the determinants of food waste that is generated in a day. And we had here the gamma output from the generalized linear model. And what we saw was that the manager's educational background has an inverse relationship with the quantity of food that is being generated. So an additional years of formal education for the manager has a tendency or the likelihood of reducing food waste by about 4%. We also saw that restaurants that prepare more dishes generate more waste. So additional dish that is prepared contribute to additional food waste by about 11%. And we saw that training of kitchen staff was also negatively correlated with the quantity of food waste being generated. Then the source of power, restaurants that had backup to their national electricity grid generated less food waste compared to those that did not have a backup power source. And what surprised us was the estimation of daily food waste. We saw a positive relationship. So restaurants that estimated food waste generated restaurants that forecasted food demand generated more food waste than those that did not forecast food demand. So those who sit back and wait for orders to come in and prepare exactly according to the order they receive, they were generating less food waste. But those that tried to make a forecast were generating more, which in our a priori expectation, this wasn't what we expected. And the reason we can give for this is that restaurants probably did not keep accurate record and the forecasting wasn't very accurate. For the waste management practices, we use the Likert scale ranking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if the restaurants practice something very frequently, then we give it the scale 1 or the rating 1. And if they never do it, we give it the rating 5. And for something like disposal, just dumping the food waste, 42 of the restaurants would always do it. 58 of them would often do it. 20 sometimes do it. And for something like source reduction, we saw that 33 of the restaurants always would reduce it at source. And for energy recovery and recycling, we see it wasn't a common practice. So based on the mean rank here, what we can see is that most of the restaurants often dispose food waste or reuse it for something else, like livestock feed, or reduce it at source. And we can see the mean rank of 4 for recycling, which means restaurants rarely would recycle food waste. And for energy recovery, the mean rank was 4.95, which is closer to 5. That is never. So the conclusion is that restaurants almost never recovered energy from food waste. Then the final objective is the challenges that restaurants face in managing food waste. And we could see from this table, based on the Kendall's coefficient of concordance, the Kendall's ranking, that the varied nature of food waste generated was seen as the number one challenge to the restaurants, followed by high cost of investing in food waste management facility. Restaurants showed concern and interest that if possible, then they would be interested in recovering energy from food waste, like having small biodigesters, but the cost of setting this up was a little bit expensive for them. And then the high cost of disposal, everyday restaurants were paying about $1 for disposing food waste. They find this to be challenging. And the consumer's behavior towards food waste, people eat and usually leave something behind. This was seen as a challenge. And finally, the behavior of the kitchen staff towards reducing food waste was seen as a challenge. And A Kendall's coefficient of concordance of 61 shows a strong agreement among this ranking that we have over here. So in conclusion, what can we pick from this study? We saw that about 320 metric tons of edible food, which is worth over 2 million US dollars, is wasted by the 120 restaurants in a year. And education, staff in-service training, and the use of power backups, also demand forecasts, are some of the determinants of food waste. We saw that restaurants are curbing food waste by reducing it as source or reusing it as livestock feed, but disposal remains a common practice without any energy recovery. And the varied nature of food waste and the high cost of investing in food waste facility, and also the high cost of disposal are major constraints restaurants face. So as part of recommendation, we came up with this, that restaurants should keep accurate records and also accurate forecasting to minimize food waste. And staff should be trained, because we saw from the regression that staff training has an inverse relationship with the quantity of food that is being wasted. And weight-based pricing. So most of the plate waste, we saw that were coming from consumers. They would order and probably they would get more than they can consume, or people are not just mindful about food waste. So if we make it a weight-based pricing, we believe that people would have the sensitivity of consuming what they buy or trying to limit it as much as possible. And also we encourage restaurants to encourage customers to package any leftovers so that they don't leave it behind. They can take it home and use it for something else. And a public-private partnership is also encouraged to help restaurants set up facilities that could recover food waste. Bringing this presentation to an end, I would like to share something simple, a quick story with you. That after this paper, everywhere I go, in Ghana, in Germany, amongst my peers, anytime we are somewhere and we order food or we cook food together, whenever people want to waste food, they say, hey, I hope Paul is not around. So I was like a policing guy of food waste management amongst my colleagues. And to date, people still have this consciousness. So what I can say is that food waste takes effort from everyone. And consciously and subconsciously, my presence and how I kept talking about food waste amongst my colleagues has helped them to develop this food waste mindedness. So ending my presentation, I would say that let us all go out there and be ambassadors for reducing global food waste. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. We'll open it up to questions. So anyone who has a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or type it in the chat. And if you are unable to unmute yourself, we can always read it out for you. Gregory, go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Paul. Really, really interesting study and really rich data as well. Awesome. I was just wondering, do you have any plans, or have you to date? Like, what are your plans in terms of disseminating these results, say, beyond the research community? I'm imagining not only for restaurant owners, but the municipal corporations in the region. This could be really rich data. And I'm thinking maybe in terms of getting some of the restaurants to actually implement your recommendations, right?
Mhm.
These would have costs to the restaurants, and they may need a little bit of motivation or incentives in terms of regulation and decision makers being on board. So yeah, really, really lovely. Just wondering your plans to disseminate. Thanks.
Hi, Nola, how do we do it? Do we take it, answer every question as it comes, or take
Yeah,
a
go
set?
ahead and do that. If we get a ton, we can ask a few in a row, but go ahead and answer directly.
Okay, thank you, Cooper. That is a very interesting question. How do we disseminate this information to the world? Yeah, um, that strikes me. And I'm thinking of the best answer to give you. What I can give you is something that I'm just coming up at the moment. But what we've done is that this paper is published, and we believe research communities will be able to see it. We see people citing it every now and then. But does it really get to the people who need most? The restaurants, consumers at household level. Is the traditional form of publication the most effective in reaching people in type such kinds of study like this? I think it is a question we all have to digest, and anyone is welcome to give a contribution. But from here, I would link up with my co-authors and my professors at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, and then we can see how best we can disseminate this rich knowledge and information, especially to the food businesses. Yeah. Thank you. And for a platform like what we have today is also good presenting this information to such a wonderful audience like you. But I think we need more. We need a more conscious effort. So I'm sorry I can't give you very practical ways we have disseminated this publication to the community at large, but this is a wake-up call for me and the things we can do. Thank you.
Sophia, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, and then afterward we have a question in the chat from Angela as well.
Um, Thank you for the presentation. That's really interesting finding. But I'm just wondering, when you were selecting the restaurant, you said you use a sampling method and all. Like, is there any, do you try to differentiate between restaurants? For instance, like I know like in Africa we have like some bookers like this small kind of restaurant, and then we also have like say fine dining restaurant and all. I'm just wondering if the kind of like waste would be different because for instance like in Nigeria when you go to this small restaurant, the portion size is very large, and that could probably influence the waste. But when you go to fine dining restaurant, I mean, you could barely even be okay with what they give you. So I'm wondering how that might actually influence food waste if you guys explore that aspect or if it's something that you are looking forward to do in the future.
Thank you, Safia. That is another brilliant question. So what do we consider a restaurant in this publication? Yeah, if you look around town, you see some, should I say kiosk or something, some corner businesses that are tagging themselves as restaurants. So we had a criteria. We had a criteria. We didn't just consider anything as a restaurant, but we looked at businesses that have set up and registered, yeah, and operating as a mainstream restaurant. These are what we considered, but the degree of operation as to how big it is varied a little bit. So if you look at our data, the distribution, it was positively skewed. Yeah, we did not have a normal distribution. It was positively skewed. That is why we use the generalized linear model to accommodate for this skewness in the distribution. Hello, Will?
Yeah, first on the uptake or use of the results, this would be a really ripe area for one of the science policy fellowships. So for anybody on the call who doesn't know, we just had the launch event, for questions about this fellowship whose applications will be due in February. And there's, plenty of time for someone, perhaps in the Ghana, community interested in this. I just looked at the citations to your paper, Paul, and it's interesting that there's sort of more citations in 2025 than in 2024. Maybe this is something where there could be some policy uptake and also outreach to companies, which links to the other projects on data analytics for food markets in Africa, where we could be reaching out to some restaurant associations to think about that. I had two questions about the data and maybe some insights that you would have just from the experience of talking with people during data collection. The first is, what was disposal like? Were people taking this to go feed chickens somewhere to go feed, maybe pigs or other animals? Or were they going to use it for compost, right? Were people
Yeah.
sort of selling it to gardeners or something around the city? And the second question is about composition, because there's a big difference if, as Safia was suggesting, this is mostly about portion size. And so
Mm-hmm.
people dish out like a huge mound of kenke or something,
Yeah.
right? And then a little bit of relish. And of course, people eat the meat, the relish, the vegetable, but then they leave, right, the pounded yam. There's just a lot
Yeah.
of that, and they just leave
Mm-hmm.
that. Do you know anything about the composition, and do you know anything about the uses of the disposed for disposal?
Thank you, Will, for such a very great input from the Science Policy Fellowship, how we can make the data reachable to the community. Also, Dafma, looking at our project, I think it will be interesting to reach out to these restaurants and let them know what we found out from this research and also engage them in what we are doing currently. I think that is brilliant. Getting back to the composition of waste, I would, just a moment. I will go back to the food waste or the quantities we have. So this is the categories of waste that was generated. So we have these leftovers, plate waste, and the disposal. But you were asking about what makes up the biggest composition. So we could see from table 2 that cassava. So fufu is like a pounded cassava. People eat it with soup or broth in a bowl, everything put together. And that was generating the most waste, about 4 kilograms in a day. This was followed by rice-based food products. So we can see the composition of food waste from table 2. And the next question you asked was, how was disposal like? For the reuse, most of the restaurants were giving out the food to livestock owners or people who had piggery. People who were pig farmers would come for the food waste and feed the animals with it. It's a very low quality food, but it works. Farmers were using it to save back, to cut down cost on pig feed. So that is what we saw. And in one restaurant, in one of the restaurants, we saw that they had these containers that were assembled at near where they dispose waste. And I asked them, what is this container for? They said, yeah, people just keep it there. We put in the waste and they feed their dogs with it. So that is one thing we saw. And I don't know how many of these restaurants were also doing the same, like people with dogs or pets who collect. And this might sound a bit weird here in the US or somewhere in the world, but basically most lives pets at home scavenge. They go around trying to find food for themselves. So if they can get kitchen leftovers from restaurant, I think that would be a first class food or feed for these pets. So that is what we saw. That is what we saw, yeah.
Yeah, I could easily imagine a nice follow-on would be the proportion of the different ingredients that end up being wasted, right? We don't know what share of the dishes are actually vegetables, meat, other ingredients.
Mhm.
I could imagine that the ingredient share might be, say, 60% starchy staples, and the
Mhm.
waste is 90% starchy staples. And then it would be very interesting on the separation. You started to, at the beginning, you said that there was not much separation of the organic versus inorganic waste. But if the market for feed from waste were to improve, that would be an interesting question. People would take the time to separate because they could sell the waste.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
It looks like Nasir has a question.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, kind of practical question, Paul. How did you quantify the leftover weight? Sorry, the monetarily to quantify the leftover weight. Uh, since they are, I guess, know nothing about the Ghanaian dishes, they could be asked our colleague that mixed dishes composed of different kind of food. During the separation, were there separation? How do you monetary value each component?
Hi, Nazar, sorry, you said how do we quantify what waste? I missed something in your
Yeah,
question.
how do you monetarily quantify the leftover weight?
Liquid waste?
The leftover, the
The
weight.
leftover. Oh, I get you. I get you. Thank you.
uh,
Yeah, so the leftover food, we asked the restaurant if you were to sell this food. For the quantity, we weighed it. We used a weighing scale to weigh to know how much leftover the restaurant had at the end of the business day, which they would not reuse for something that would bring them money. And for the monetary value, we asked them if you were to sell this, or if you had not, if you were to sell this, how much would you have
So,
gained from it? Yeah, so that is how we quantify the leftover food.
so
And
what about
sometimes something like a wrong order, a customer would place an order and maybe due to some oversight, it will be a wrong order and it becomes something that nobody takes, which becomes a waste to the restaurant. So this um, or the wrong orders are part of the leftover
so
category.
the valuation was not based on the dishes value that the customer ordered, rather on the manager's expertise to value the dish, the leftover.
Yeah, usually the valuation is similar. What the kitchen staff or the manager would evaluate it would most likely be how much the customer would have paid for. So there's not much difference over there. But that is a very interesting question, and it is good we pointed out. Thank you, Nazar. Hello, Gregory. You have another question. Please go
Yeah,
ahead.
if that's okay. I just wondered if you could just chat a little bit about how the process of recruiting the restaurants went. I mean, did some restaurant managers feel you were conducting an inspection? Was there any suspicion? Just generally, I think you said how many restaurants was it again? 150?
120.
120, yeah.
Yeah.
So did many say no, thank you, we don't want to be involved? What was the uptake quite? Were they quite enthusiastic? How was the process?
Yes, we went around some of the restaurants, not necessarily because they were suspicious that we 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 want data that will be used against them or any other way. But some were just busy. And we could see it. We go and the manager would be like, "Can you please hold on and wait for me?" Then they would be busy serving or doing something. And at some point, they would try to get back to us, what's the point? And at some point, it just couldn't work because some of them were so busy and they couldn't have sufficient time for us. And I think what helped is that we went as students in our attire. The agribusiness students from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, we have a uniform. We wear a purple or mauve colored shirt. So with we the students having our shirts, everyone in the same shirt, they had some trust in us, and we also had our students' IDs presented, and also a letter from our supervisor that was explaining this work and why we need their support. So I think that helped us to gain trust. So the few rejections we got was mainly due to time constraint. Thank you, Gregory.
And
Hello,
Olutayo.
Lutayo.
Yes, yeah, thank you. And great presentation, Paul. I have two questions. First, I'd like to know about the scale of the restaurants that were recruited. Like, were they like medium scale businesses? And then in terms of the kind of traffic that they would get, because I think that would also, must have maybe provided some sort of variations and the quantity per the restaurant. Then the second thing would be that regarding the leftovers, did you at any point take into consideration leftovers that were taken away by the restaurant staff? Because I think that is a thing that when there is supposed to be food waste, then the restaurant can tell the staff to like take the food home and it's not actually waste, even though it bears some financial cost on the restaurant because they could have sold that food, but eventually somehow is meeting the needs of their staff. So I don't know if you have anything to say on that. Thank you and well done.
Thank you, Lutaya. Very excellent questions. And the last one particularly is a bit challenging. Yeah, but let's get to it. So first, the scale of the restaurants. The restaurants, what we found, I mentioned that they are registered restaurants, but the scale varied. So that's why we got this positively skewed distribution. Yeah, some of them were big and others were a little bit smaller restaurants. But the traffic wasn't necessarily scale dependent because there could be some small establishments, but due to their strategic location and probably their marketing and advertising, traffic was higher as compared to probably some fancy and big restaurants in the city that might not generate as much traffic. We didn't look detailed into that about the scale versus traffic, but this is what I can tell from the general observation. And for the leftovers that were taken home by the staff, which, yes, it ended up being consumed by somebody, so we can't really say it was wasted. But yeah, that is a brilliant question, and it is something we didn't make a follow-up on. But I think that is interesting, and maybe we could note it down for future food waste studies. Yeah, that is a great point. Thank you. Hello, Alex.
Great. Well, first, I just want to thank you for this really fantastic presentation. Learned a lot. I thought it was wonderful. I have a similar question to Greg about sort of qualitatively the reaction of these restaurant managers to and being involved in your study. Just hoping you can give us a sense of what they thought about food waste, if you had a chance to talk with them at all. Like, had they thought about this before? Was it an issue for them? Did they think it was important, not important? I'm just kind of curious, like, if you could give us a sense of what they thought. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. There is one of the descriptive variables that I left out, and that was measuring the restaurants, their perception about food waste, and also the perception of the kitchen staff about food waste. But unfortunately, I left it out. But from our general observation, we saw that they were particularly interested in knowing how much food is being wasted, because what happens is that if you are not very food waste minded, you wouldn't realize this, because people leave bits and pieces. Like a customer will eat and would leave something which you think is very small because it is just a small portion, a quarter of the plate, and you don't think this is so much a waste, or you think this is a normal thing. But at the end of the day, if we aggregate this and put it together, that would be surprising. So what most of the managers expressed was to know what is happening, to know what is happening. Like one manager particularly told us to share the findings with him. One restaurant around campus, which it is not out of ethic to mention names of restaurants or research participants, I would have mentioned his name. He was particularly interested in knowing the findings of this study, and we did share that with him after the publication. So yeah, some were really excited and wanted to know what is happening because they did not have a bigger picture, because they've not sat down to do a study to aggregate everything, but they were very interested in knowing what is going on. Thank you, Alex.
I also have a question. just hearing that, I'd be very curious to know if that restaurant owner or any of the others ended up changing their behavior, but I'm sure you probably don't know that or if it long term had any effect. But I was wondering about the composition of the waste. You have the composition table
Hmm.
and the breakdown between the leftovers versus the on the plate.
Yeah.
Do you know if there was I don't know if you have this or if you looked at it, but what the difference between the food waste in the food leftovers, the composition of the food leftovers versus the composition of the plate waste was? For example, was it, was mainly the cassava being wasted on the plate or as the food leftover portion in the restaurant? Because I imagine that would have a big effect on how
Mhm.
restaurants, for example, would deal with this moving forward.
Yeah. That is another brilliant question, Nola, and also very it's hard to give you a proper answer. Yeah, so what is going into the food leftover and what is going into the plate waste? This, I think we would have to look at the data again. But from experience, I can say that it is easy for restaurants to, like those that forecasted food demand, it is easy to do it for something like rice and something like the maize-based products because they cook everything in bulk and wait for people to order it. Because something like banku or kenke or tozafi, you don't do it for every little bit of demand that comes. You prepare it within a day, how much you forecast that people would need, and then as people make their demand, you sell it to them. So uh, but something like boiled yam, cocoyam, and plantain, there's something people want to eat fresh and warm. So you wait when people make their demand, then you just do it instantly for them. So I I see more of that probably not going into the food leftover because it is mostly done on demand. But for the rice and the maize-based product and also fufu, the cassava-based product, people would most likely make a projection of how much they can sell within the day. And if much is not bought or sold, then a lot will go into the food leftover.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hey, Kennedy. Kennedy was my mate. He was in another group. So when we were going through this ordeal, he was right there in the audience looking at what we are going to do and how we would survive. Kennedy has a question. Ken, go ahead.
Hello, Paul, and hello, everyone. Sorry I joined a bit late, but it was quite an interesting project that you guys did. So I have a question though, but so after the observations that you've done in your study, I'm just curious to know the position of EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency in Ghana,
Mhm.
and maybe some regulations that they have concerning food waste, and especially someone who has experienced a bit of how waste is separated here in Europe.
Yeah.
Maybe if you can share some insight into some regulations concerning organic waste, maybe plastic waste, and the whatever use that the such waste could be made.
Yeah. Thank you, Kennedy. Uh, I'm glad you are here to support. And also you had this nice question about the EPA. Yes. So from experience in Europe and here in the US, what we see, especially what I found in Germany, was how people were very conscious about segregating food waste. And I believe you being in Belgium at the moment, you have a great feel of what is happening, how households and restaurants and businesses segregate waste from plastic to those that organic waste and bottles and other things. The same happening here in the US. So I think it would be something nice that if we can, like what Will proposed through the Science Policy Fellowship and outreach to these businesses, if we can find a way to communicate the findings and make recommendations to the Environmental Protection Agency, I think that would be brilliant. It is not something that is being done in our country or for the most part of it, but I think it would be a brilliant thing to suggest or recommend to these bodies. And what we found from the challenges the restaurants face was that they also mentioned untimely collection of food waste. So sometimes they will generate the organic waste and it will be sitting there for a couple of days, and especially in the heat of the harmattan or the warm seasons, it releases some stench which is not pleasant. And in terms of food safety, that could also raise issues. So I think this is a direct something that we can directly call in the EPA to make a contribution to help address such a problem. So brilliant suggestion. Thank you, Kennedy.
Looks like we might have time for one last question if anyone else wants to ask something. But I know Olatayo also commented in the chat. Olatayo, if you want to unmute and mention that or elaborate at all.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Okay, I was just thinking about the findings again that since I mean the food wasted are mostly starchy staples. So I was just like, that's what the restaurants actually provide and supply. And if we're all about providing healthy diet to, consumers, it means that these restaurants have like a very crucial role in providing, more healthy foods to consumers and they can purchase it, like in terms of vegetables, terms of meats and just basically foods that we know would improve the health of the consumers. But then from this findings, it's just like starchy staples and it's what's available, is what's supplied that consumers will buy. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Olutayo. Yeah, thank you for this submission. Yeah, one thing I have to make it clear is that yes, we see starchy staples, but this is based on a meal basis. So something like rice, we talk about something like jollof rice. Jollof rice is like a complete meal. So it has vegetables, it has the meat, it has almost everything you would want in a food, like the minerals, salt or the table salt, it has the oils. So something like wache is a combination of rice and beans cooked together. So maybe what your question could point out is that we considering segregating the starchy staples from other food ingredients like the vegetables and fruits and meat or fish that goes with it or egg. So that is very interesting. Unfortunately, we've published the work, but there is always room for improvement, and we can consider this in future studies. I'm particularly interested in this field of research, and hopefully in the future, I can work or collaborate on working in related topics. So I think this will be very interesting to consider in any future work. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, very much for this presentation. I think everyone learned a lot. I definitely learned a lot. And thank you to your coworkers and also for acknowledging Eugenia. Really appreciate your presentation and thank you everyone else for joining us. I've put links to the Science Policy Fellowships to today's event page where we'll post the recording and which also has the link to Paul and his co-author's paper, and then the links to both of the research communities as well. They're all in the chat. And then after this, you'll get a quick pop-up with a couple of questions about the research communities and whether you feel like we could improve it all or to give us feedback. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks Paul for your presentation. Bye.
Thank you, Noah.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay.
As well, great presentation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.